Okay, you are looking live. 28 Pittsburgh Street. In the heart of Columbiana, Ohio. That meant nothing to Elise. She just keeps on. Really, Annie? All right, tell me where we left off. Who you got last? Jaden takes good notes back there. Oh, we're on Stalin? We're way past Kojo. Who's that guy? Everybody remember his name? Hirohito.
Wait.
H-I-R-O-H-I-T-O. Hirohito. And that's Tojo. Hold on. Who had more immediate power in Japan?
Left guy.
Tojo or Hirohito? Tojo. But all of that power that Tojo had was easy for him to access, because in Japan you are conditioned and socialized into believing that this guy was God, small g. He is the emperor of Japan, is a god. So this guy's job is to make sure all of Japan pays homage to Hirohito. Hirohito really doesn't rule, he just is, right? And Tojo's job is to make sure, especially militarily, that everything's done to honor the emperor. We talked yesterday about how that's going to play out at the end of the war. Stalin, the man of steel, governed as a totalitarian dictator. Now, I didn't write down the 4 Russian words that are abbreviated NKVD because it sufficed to just call it by its initials. This was his version of the brown shirts or black shirts. All of these dictators that rule with an iron fist have a quote unquote paramilitary force that is kind of like at their convenience, at their beck and call. Hey, there's a situation that needs taken care of. So they go take care of it. If there's some kind of political uprising or people trying to go against what the tyrant says and his dictatorial power, then they will send their force there to intimidate and stop that behavior. Stalin ruled by selling to his government. He's the supreme. Whoa, what was that? Is that a fly in February?
Wait a minute.
What is it?
Kill it. It's on the board. It's on the front of your desk. Certification.
Yeah, right there.
How's there a fly in the middle of February, 0 degrees out?
That's great.
It was literally like 6 degrees when I got in my car this morning.
Hit it.
You okay if I heard it?
Yes.
No, don't do it.
No.
Don't do it on the certificate.
No, that's a living legend right on it.
Animal rights.
Okay, he was, remember, he's a dictator, he's a totalitarian dictator. However, in all of these cases, there's still a assembly. Don't lose sight of that. There's still a government. He just has all the power vested in him. Does that make sense? So there's still, what we would like our Congress, there's still parliament in Germany. And there's still government in Russia. Well, in his 5-year plan, the idea was, first thing we have to do is make all agriculture, all farms part of the collective. Collectivize agriculture. You have a farm, and you have a farm, and you have a farm, we're gonna make this more efficient. There's no reason for you to, by the way, private property, how selfish can you get? Right? In America, one of the foundations of our democracy is the idea that you can have private property, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness comes from the British idea of life, liberty, and being able to own property, right? So this flies in the face of, unintended, flies in the, I just pulled my face. This idea flies in the face of American culture because we don't believe in the collective. Communist, of course, collectivism, communism are synonymous. Stalin made it so that you no longer owned your land. It's not your farm. It's the state's farm. It's the people's farm. We're all in this together. So if you go against this idea of collectivized agriculture, you will be paying the price. We need to destroy this idea of individual liberty. How are we going to do that? We're going to get control of the media and education. By the way, Hitler did these things too. Censorship is a big part of any dictatorship. Adding to the division in America right now that you're seeing all around you in your teenage years is the idea that there's so much censorship going on. I mean, the anger just keeps building because people have different ideas, and that's what was always a good thing. It used to be that we cultivated the idea of, bringing different ideas to the table and debating them. Well, in the times that we're living right now, especially in the last few years, you've got control of a lot of media by just a handful of companies, Amazon, Google. There's those two really, think about it. And they're controlling what's acceptable, right? You know that there's something called cancel culture, right? Well, what is that? It's if your opinion or your idea doesn't line up with what the current government is wanting to do, well, then they just cancel you, they censor you. That's not the American way. The American way is everybody brings their ideas to the table, we debate them, and that's called freedom, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And now we're somehow, for whatever, well, I know the reason, but we're in this culture where you go against what the government's trying to implement and you're just canceled. You're erased from, your opinion doesn't matter. It's great. And finally, people are starting to fight back. So if you don't know what's going on with the truckers in Canada, you need to pay attention to that because it's becoming more of a worldwide thing. People, the good news about all of this is regular people who don't really pay much attention to politics or they'd rather not watch the news, more and more people are becoming success. Did Russia as a country become more industrialized? Did they take advantage of all new technologies? Yep. Was the government itself prospering? Yep. Did you guys read Animal Farm with Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Every time I talk about the book, I bring up basically the gist of the book is all pigs are equal. It's just that some pigs are equal than others. So in this type of system, there appears to be progress. Russia's doing, quote unquote, better under Stalin's regime. Stalin, who comes in and with that iron fist rules and clears out all enemies and they become very industrialized. He leads them into the nuclear age, technology. But what about the regular people? How are they doing? How are they doing when they don't have free speech? How are they doing when they can't even own their own piece of property? How's that working out for them? How will they be doing when the government who controls everything messes up? See, in a free market, if the people that produce our food right? What we need to exist. If they mess up, so you see in regimes like this, in socialist communist countries, when the government messes up, everybody suffers. And you see bread lines and soup lines. And then they'll come back and say, well, yeah, but what about the Great Depression because of capitalism? Right. So have what's called boom and bust, boom, and you have this cycle of things get better, things get worse. In your lifetime, you experienced it. When you were just after you were born, there was a 2008 stock market went way down. There was a big in Stalin's eyes. What could be wrong? Russia is growing. Russia is industrialized. Russia is becoming a superpower. Russia's into the nuclear age with all this technology at the beginning, and neither do they. In fact, we'll get to it later, but when the war was just beginning, Russia was actually siding with Germany. Which in your mind, you probably think that makes sense because, Hitler, Russia, they're almost like the same thing in your mind right now, right? But you know that they were our allies in World War I, and they're going to be our allies in World War II. So now we've covered Hitler, Mussolini, Tojo, and Stalin. And there's the man of steel, ruling with that iron fist. And this is
Joseph Stalin was Secretary General of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and Premier of the Soviet state. He dictatorially ruled the Soviet Union for a quarter of a century, transforming it into a major world power.
success.
Joseph Stalin was born. Political promotion came in 1912 when Vladimir Lenin appointed him to the first Central Committee of the Bolshevik Party. Under Lenin's influence as party leader, Stalin played a key role in the Russian Revolution.
You might not be familiar with a genre of entertainment or movies called like mafia type movies. Doesn't that kind of reminds me of like two mafia bosses, doesn't it? And that's kind of what a lot of people compare when you have socialist or dictatorial communist type governments. It's as if the mafia is in charge of all society. You've got these two big bosses sitting there planning everybody's life for them, and they're the ones benefiting from everything. They got all the power to literally over your life and death.
When Lenin died in 1924, Stalin succeeded.
By the way, Ukraine is I think that's cool. What's this area of the country called? I know you guys have answered this before. The breadbasket of the United States, the plains where all the crops are grown, right? Ukraine is that in former Soviet Union. And by the way, when I say former Soviet Union, part of the problem going on right now is Russia claims that Ukraine should just be part of, the end of the Cold War brought the end of the Soviet Union, right? So then Russia was just Russia, and you had all these other states, countries that became independent again. Putin, the idea in Russia right now is they want to take back what they think was rightfully their territories. Ukraine being one. When they don't do it, when the government's in charge and they get it wrong. Now you've got the breadbasket turning into famine. And millions of people die.
Elite members of the Communist Party, executing or deporting many of them. In all, Stalin's political victims numbered in the tens of millions. Though Stalin originally allied himself with Hitler, the German dictator posed a threat to the Soviet Union, and Stalin joined the Allies in the fight against Hitler. Stalin died suddenly on March 5th, 1953. He had been in poor health, but now many suspect that poison was involved. I believe in one thing only, the power of human will. Joseph Stalin.
By the way, don't let that quote go unnoticed in that this is also a part of the equation, especially for us as Christians, that the first government has to be religion. Not just Christianity, but for our purposes, it would be Christianity. We have to eradicate, if you are going to set up a Marxist, socialist, communist government, eradicate the idea that people, you got to get rid of this religious idea where people depend on a higher government. So who assumes that authority position in people's lives is the government? And you got to do that. Otherwise, people will keep hanging on to this hope and what they would say is this supernatural that they don't believe